Today is October 23rd, 2019. The time is approximately 9:22 a.m. We are now on the record. This is the beginning of Media One and the deposition of Eric Hichman and the matter of Staubus versus Purdue Pharma et al. The case is in the Circuit Court for Sullivan County at Kingsport, Tennessee.
Wait a minute. Machine's over. That's never happened to me. Wait a minute. It's this
Take your
hum
time.
button. It's the hum button. Let me scoot over. I think this thing made it fall over. It's not level.
It's mic a lot. It's old school. Yeah. I feel like Elvis Presley.
Okay, this case is in the circuit court.
This case is in the Circuit Court for Sullivan County at Kingsport, Tennessee. Case number C-41916, Division C. The location is 9 Bryan Boulevard, Arden, North Carolina, 28704. My name is Chuck Habrack. I'm the videographer. The court reporter is LaShonda Bird. We're representing Mallincrodt Litigation Services. If counsel will please introduce yourselves, whom you're representing, then the court reporter can swear in the witness.
Ben Gastel on behalf of the plaintiffs.
Joshua Goldstein on behalf of the witness and Mallincrodt LLC.
Jessica Soricelli on behalf of the witness and Mallincrodt LLC.
Erica Guthrie of Arnold and Porter on behalf of the Endo and Par defendants.
Chad Wallace of the Becker Donaldson Law Firm for the same Endo Par defendants.
Please raise your right hand and I'll get you sworn in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony that you will be given today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I swear.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good morning, Mr. Hickman. Will you please state your full name for the record?
Yep, Eric Tyson Hichman.
And it's pronounced Hichman, not Hichman.
Correct.
I'm going to probably struggle with that throughout the day, and I'll apologize now. I'm going to hand you a document that I'll mark as Exhibit 1. That is the subpoena for this matter. Have you ever seen this document before, sir?
Yep, yes.
And you understand that we're here today pursuant to this subpoena?
Yes.
And you are providing testimony in the case that's listed on this subpoena in Exhibit 1?
Yes.
And then I'm going to hand you a document that we'll mark as Exhibit 2. And that's just the supplemental notice of today's deposition. You understand that we're here today to provide testimony in Staubus versus Purdue Pharmaceutical et al., and specifically as your role as the specialty sales representative for Mallincrodt Pharmaceuticals.
Yes.
When did you first learn that you would have to sit for today's deposition?
August 27th.
So the day you were served with the subpoena?
Yep.
What did you do after receiving the subpoena?
I don't understand the question.
Well, did you call a lawyer after that?
Yeah, I reached out to this company. Yep.
And how did you know, and I don't want to know, I don't want to know any conversations that you've had with your lawyer, but how did you know to reach out to Mr. Goldstein?
They had reached out to me knowing that this was going to be
Objection. I'm
Comment.
going to instruct you not to reveal any communications between your counsel, including any counsel for Mallincrodt LLC.
And again, and Mr. Goldstein is correct. I don't want to know anything that happened with your lawyers. I don't want to know anything that happened in the conversation with them, but it sounds like you had talked with Mr. Goldstein prior to receiving the subpoena.
Objection. I'm instructing you can answer yes or no.
no.
And again, I don't want to know anything about the conversation, but had you talked with an attorney in Mr. Goldstein's law firm prior to receiving the subpoena?
No. I was kind of surprised to get it because I hadn't been with the company in many years.
Sure, and I believe that you had left the company in June of 2015, is that right?
On or about?
When did you learn that today's deposition would go forward today, for the date of today?
Last week, in the last couple weeks.
And then what did you do to prepare for today's deposition? And again, I don't want to know anything that might have been said in a meeting with counsel, but what did you do in preparation for today's deposition?
What did I do? I met with Josh yesterday.
And again, I don't want to know anything that happened in that conversation, but how long was it?
7 hours.
And you're represented today at this deposition by Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
Are you personally paying him?
No.
And you understand that Mr. Goldstein also represents Mallincrodt in the litigation?
Yes.
Did you have to take time off of your current job to be here today?
Yes.
Did you tell your current employer that you were being here today?
I am the owner.
I see. So you're your own employer.
Yes. So I gave myself notice that I would be off
Got
for
it.
the next couple of days.
During your 7-hour meeting yesterday, other than Mr. Goldstein, did anybody else attend that meeting?
Yes.
And that's the other counsel here today.
Yes.
But nobody from Mallincrodt was there?
No.
Have you talked with anybody at Mallincrodt in preparation for today's deposition?
No.
Counsel, I'll just clarify for the record, when you said other counsel was present, you were referring to Ms. Sorcelli and
Yes.
not counsel for Endo?
Yes.
Who were not present?
Sorry.
No problem.
I hand you a document that we've marked as Exhibit 3. Hand a copy of your LinkedIn profile. Do you recognize this document, sir?
Yes.
Is this a copy of your LinkedIn profile?
Looks like it.
Is the information on here truthful and accurate?
Yes.
Objection.
Did you put this information into the LinkedIn system?
I believe so. Sure.
Do you keep your LinkedIn profile updated?
No.
It says here that you are the senior national field consultant for the beef jerky outlet franchise.
I was.
And when did you leave that position?
January.
January of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I need a verbal confirmation, sir, a yes or a no.
Yes.
And again, I'm not trying to be rude, it's just that our blessed court reporter over here struggles to take down the uh-huhs and the uh-huhs. And it also shows here that you are the owner of the Vista Retail Group.
Yes.
And it shows here that you started that position in November of 2014.
Yes.
And that's the position that you hold today.
Yes.
Is that the only employment that you have today?
Yes.
What is the Vista Retail Group?
It's our entity. It's our corporation doing
what-
business as Beef Jerky Outlet. Beef Jerky Outlet is a franchise, so our company is Vista Retail Group, doing business as Beef Jerky Outlet.
And how many beef jerky outlets do you operate through your Vista Retail Group?
2 currently, 3 starting next week.
Where are the 2 current locations?
Asheville and Cherokee, North Carolina.
Where's the 3rd location going to be?
Hickory, North Carolina.
And then it shows here, again, going on Exhibit 3, the next employment listed for you is your specialty sales representative employment with Mallincrodt Pharmaceuticals. Do you
Yep.
see that?
Yes.
And it shows that you had worked in that position from September 2011 through June of 2015. Is that correct to the best of your recollection?
Well, when I left GlaxoSmithKline, I actually got hired by Covidien Pharmaceuticals. And I worked for Covidien for approximately 2 years. And then Covidien just got absorbed, got whatever with Mallincrodt Pharmaceuticals. So instead of making this busy, I just made it easy saying Mallincrodt from September 2011 to June 2015.
Sure, and that makes sense. And essentially, what you were doing for Covidien is what you were doing for Mallincrodt. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And then at some point they merged or were absorbed into Mallincrodt, and you continued with the role, but you were then sort of employed at that point by Mallincrodt instead of Covidien.
Yes.
And then, again, going back to your LinkedIn profile, it shows that you were executive sales representative for GlaxoSmithKline from June 2003 to September of 2011. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes.
And is that the correct dates that you worked for GlaxoSmithKline?
I believe so.
And then the next employment listed is Juice Running. Am I saying that correctly?
No, just running.
Just Running. I guess I should have figured that out. Is that here in Asheville?
Yes.
And it's still in operation?
Yes.
I ran by it this morning, strangely enough.
Great store.
It looked like a great store. It was too early for it to be open when I went cruising by there about 5:30 this morning. But you were the owner and president of that business?
Yes.
And then you sold it to join GlaxoSmithKline?
I didn't sell it to join GlaxoSmithKline. I sold it and then got employed by GlaxoSmithKline.
Got it.
I owned also some stores in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I sold them.
Got it. What prompted you, that seems like a pretty significant career change from going to a running store to being a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. What prompted that?
I thought it would be a great job to have. I knew friends that were in the industry, and it was something that I wanted to do. Before, if you go back to, let's see here. There's the, so my original job out of college was I worked for Xerox. So I was in sales and was a sales manager. I was a salesperson for 2 years, was sales manager. And then I left to open up the running specialty stores. So to go back into sales I considered quite a jump. I was in sales before, started my own business, sold it, got back into sales.
Got it. And then when you were at GlaxoSmithKline, did you have an assigned territory?
Yes.
And was that territory in Asheville?
Partially, yes.
Well, what was your assigned territory at GlaxoSmithKline?
I've had many, many different territories. Nature of the industry, you could switch territories quarter by quarter. So to say I had Asheville, actually when I got hired from GlaxoSmithKline, I didn't even have the Asheville territory. I had a Tennessee territory until that person retired here in Asheville. Then I took his position. That's what they had hired me for. But I had been as far east as Charlotte and Hickory area, and parts of Tennessee, parts of Virginia. So nature of the industry is you don't have a set territory for the 11 years. I had many different territories.
Sure.
And I sold many, many different products.
That was my next thing. At GlaxoSmithKline, were you assigned to a single product, or did your product shift over time?
Shift all the time.
At GlaxoSmithKline, were you involved at all in the sale of opioids?
No. The only one that would overlap was Sumaville.
What is it?
Sumaville for migraines.
When you left Mallincrodt, you haven't rejoined the pharmaceutical world. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about your time at Mallincrodt just from a very broad perspective. You joined the specialty sales department at Mallincrodt. Is that fair to say?
Yep.
What prompted your move from GlaxoSmithKline to Covidien?
After being with GlaxoSmithKline for 9-10 years, I was ready for a change, and I had an opportunity to start with Covidien Pharmaceuticals. So I met with who would have been my manager, potential manager, and we had a good lunch. We talked about stuff, talked about the position, and then I decided to leave.
When you first started at Covidien, who did you report to?
Todd Dean.
And how long was he supervisor, if you recall?
I'm going to say for 1.5 years.
And then who became your supervisor?
Todd Druin.
How long was he your supervisor?
I'd say probably for 6 months.
And then who became your supervisor?
Paul Jones.
How long was he your supervisor?
I would say for 1 year, approximately.
And then who became your supervisor?
Nobody. That was it. I left the company because they laid off the sales force.
I understand that, but it looks like you worked there for almost 4 years. And if I'm doing my math correctly, you've described about 3 years worth of supervisors.
Okay.
But were those your only 3 supervisors that you had
Yes.
while you were there?
Yes.
And you said that when you were leaving GlaxoSmithKline, you met with your supervisor and talked about the job. Would that have been Todd Dean?
Yes.
When you first joined Covidien, what was the scope of your territory?
I can't recall.
Did it include parts of Tennessee?
I can't recall.
When do you recall first taking over territory in Tennessee?
I would have no idea. It could have been when I first started. It could have been after 1 year. It could have been after 2 years. I don't really know, to be honest with you. Again, it's been, 5 years since I worked in the organization. I've sold many products, many territories, and when I left, and I've been very, very busy doing other things. And so specific dates, specific products, specific messages, it'll be tough for me to come up with because I've moved on.
Sure. But you would agree with me that at some point during your tenure at Covidien and Mallincrodt, you were responsible for territory in Tennessee, correct?
Yes.
And that included principally territory in East Tennessee?
Yes.
How far west do you recall ever going for your work with Covidien or Mallincrodt?
I can't recall.
Did you have clients in Nashville?
No.
Did you call upon prescribers or writers in Cookeville, Tennessee?
Objection informed.
Not that I'm aware of.
In Knoxville, Tennessee?
Same objection.
Possibly. It's getting closer to Asheville, so there's a possibility that I could have.
In Johnson City, Tennessee?
Yes.
When you worked for Mallincrodt, would you keep a journal of your day-to-day activities?
What kind of journal?
Any type of written record of what you did that day?
Personally written?
Personally written, typed in any shape, form, or fashion?
No.
How would you keep track of how often you would call upon prescribers?
Well, we had a computer and we would put in our, who we saw.
So there's a computer system
Yes.
where you would log your daily activity,
Yep.
and that would include every single prescriber that you contacted that day?
Objection informed.
I would imagine, could be. Was there ever times maybe where I didn't put one in because I forgot? Possibly.
Well, sure, but your general practice would have been to log into this computer system your interactions with prescribers.
Yes.
When you logged into that computer system, would there be a way to note whether or not your interaction with a prescriber was in person or over the phone?
I can't recall.
Do you remember the name of the computer system?
Have no idea.
As you sit here today, can you recall the name of any doctor you specifically saw in Tennessee?
Off the top of my head?
Yeah.
No. If you gave me a list, I could tell you.
Sure, and we'll go through some documents later. During your time at Mallinckrodt, what other sales representatives for Mallinckrodt or Covidien also worked in Tennessee, if you recall?
I can't recall.
Can you recall any of the sales representatives that you worked with?
Sure.
What were their names?
Well, I reported to Paul Jones, Todd Dean. There was reps in Charlotte that I interacted with, Tony Spellings, Sid Seegers out of Columbia, Charlotte in Greenville, South Carolina, Chris Clark. He was in a Tennessee territory. And I think that may be it.
When you worked for Covidien and Mallincrodt, what were the drugs that you were principally selling?
Objection informed.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, Exalgo, Pensed.
You gotta say it slow, some of them.
Exalgo,
Okay.
Pensed, Sartemis, and I can't remember any other ones. Not that there wasn't more, but I can't recall. Sometimes you might have a drug for a quarter, for 3 months, get trained on it, and then it gets moved to a different sales force. So.
Sure. But the three you listed, would you consider that to be the three primary drugs that you were responsible for?
Objection informed.
I don't know about primary, but yeah, I mean, there were 3 of the main drugs that I would have promoted to physicians.
If you looked at your LinkedIn profile, again, going back to Exhibit 3, is it safe to say that Exalgo and Artemis are the only two drugs listed there?
Looks like it, yep.
And you also list that you are the exclusive territory rep for the Asheville, Western North Carolina area.
Yes.
And was that true?
I believe so. Exclusive meaning that Mallincrodt didn't have very many overlapping representatives.
Sure.
Whereas, for example, GlaxoSmithKline, we would have teams. So say for the Asheville area, we would have up to 7 representatives in a given territory.
And then also in your LinkedIn profile, you describe your experience as specialty division primarily on pain specialists, orthopedic, and general surgeons and rheumatologists. Do you see that?
Yep.
And those were the principal types of physicians that you would call on, correct?
Objection to form.
I mean, more or less, yes. I mean, it could be primary care, it could be whoever, you know, whatever the disease state. If there was specialists that were treating a specific disease state, then I could have possibly called on them.
Did you see in the news recently that Mallincrodt paid $24 million in a settlement reached to avoid going to trial in Ohio for its role in the opioid crisis?
Objection to form.
You didn't see that in the news?
Oh,
Same objection.
Would it surprise you to learn that that was the case?
Same objection.
I'm indifferent to it. I don't. Okay.
Do you personally know anyone addicted to opioids?
No.
Do you know anyone who abuses opioids?
No.
What is your understanding of the opioid problems in this country?
Objection to form.
I don't have an opinion of it.
This has been in the news recently a lot. Do you not follow the news on this particular issue?
No.
Same objection.
Do you not follow the news at all?
I don't follow this news.
Is there a reason why?
Not interested. I'm more pertaining to news that's current. I'm interested in news that's with my current affairs, or business type stuff, and it's just not, you know, no, I'm not that interested. When I walked away from it, I walked away from it, so I'm not, you know, that's it.
When you were working at Covidian and Mallincrodt, did you pay attention to the news about the opioid crisis in this country?
Objection to form.
Not really.
Did you follow any news about opioid abuse when you were at Covidian or Mallincrodt?
Same objection.
Define, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I don't really bring any of them with them, but for about 10 years, hardly go by, a week goes by where there wasn't a news article somewhere in this country about opioid abuse. You didn't read any of that while you were in Covidian or Mallincrodt?
I don't believe that they're, not saying that you're not telling the truth, but I'm just saying that I don't recall reading an article every week or even seeing an article every week about any opioid crisis going on.
Well, what do you believe, do you believe that there is an opioid problem in this country?
Objection to form.
I don't have an opinion on it.
You don't have an opinion one way or the other?
Correct.
So you have no understanding about what opioid abuse is?
Objection to form.
I know what opioid abuse is, yes.
Were you trained while you were at Covidian and Mallincrodt about opioid abuse?
Yes.
Objection.
But for me to keep up with it in the news, no. when we're training, when we go through training, we're trained on the benefits of a medicine, the potential side effects of a medicine, how it could bring best value to the patients.
And do you have an understanding at all of how opioids are diverted?
Objection.
No,
Are you familiar with that term, opioid diversion?
somewhat.
What is your understanding of the term?
I don't really have a definition in my head of opioid diversion.
Are you familiar? Did you have one when you worked at Covidien and
Not that I'm
Mallincrodt?
aware of.
Are you familiar with the drug OxyContin?
I've heard of it, yes.
Do you believe that OxyContin is addictive?
I don't have an opinion on that.
When you were working for Covidien and Mallincrodt, did you ever look at opioid prescription rates in Tennessee?
Objection to form.
I would imagine they were reports that were given to me, just
What-
as they would have been given to me for any medicine, any company, any, part of the job.
Those would be reports about the physicians that were in your, or prescribers. Let me start over. Those would have been reports for prescribers in your territory as to what opioids they were prescribing?
Objection to form.
Could have been. I would imagine among other medicines that they were prescribing.
Did you ever do any research about the Tennessee Department of Health publications on the opioid crisis in Tennessee?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you ever read any Tennessee Department of Health about opioid abuse in Tennessee?
Not that I'm aware of.
Have you ever read a Tennessee Department of Health report about opioid diversion in the state of Tennessee?
Not that I'm aware of.
That wasn't something that you were paying attention to when you were at Covidien and Mallincrodt selling opioids in Tennessee?
Can
Objection
you
to
repeat the
form.
question?
That wasn't something that you were paying attention to when you worked for Covidien and Mallincrodt while you were promoting opioids in the state of Tennessee?
Same objection.
No. Nope. What I was focused on was, just like with what I'd been doing with any of the pharmaceutical companies that I worked for, was delivering a specific message to the physicians that would best benefit the patients and help educate the doctors. That's what I did, 8 to 10 times a day, different doctors, drive over there, do my job, get in my car, drive home.
Sure.
I then go on with my life.
Did you ever have conversations with people at Mallincrodt concerning opioid abuse in Tennessee?
Objection to form.
Could have, possibly.
As you sit here today, do you recall any of those conversations?
No.
Did you ever receive special training on how to identify problematic opioid prescribers?
Objection to form.
Maybe. I don't know.
As you sit here today, do you recall receiving such training?
Same objection.
I could have. No, I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, you talked earlier about how you had received training on the drugs that you were promoting, correct?
Yes.
And that would be before you went out and talked to prescribers, you would take a training module of some sort to learn about the drug, right?
Sometimes we would do a training module, but usually it was much more intense than that. So when you come on board with the company, I would be at their home office for weeks, learning any possible disease state, the products, competitive type products, benefits, side effects. So to say that it was just from a module that we read would be inaccurate.
Okay, and I understand that. And you did that for Exalgo,
Yes,
and you did that for Zardamus.
yes.
And then, did you go to Mallincrodt's home office to receive that training for Exalgo?
Well, where was Mallincrott's home office at the time? So I was in St. Louis, so, but I think that was with Covidian, so, but if it was Covidian then Mallincrott, then yes.
And then, were you at the home office for his Artemis training too?
I can't recall. Could have been at a national sales meeting. So a lot of times what they'll do is we'll get training manuals, modules, as you said, have to go through those, get tested on those, and then they bring everybody in for like a national meeting where we would get further training. And I can't remember specifically if we did that with that drug or not. I'm sure we probably did.
Do you recall ever being told to treat prescribers in Tennessee in terms of promoting opioids differently than in other states within your territory?
No. Really, the only difference would be is if there was insurance coverage for any medicine. So, that would be, but our message was the same, would be the same message no matter what state you're in. It would just be a matter of whether different insurance companies covered it, didn't cover it, etc.
Kind of done this a couple of times, and I'll try not to ask repeated questions, but could you just describe for the record, as a specialty sales representative for Covidian and Mallincrodt, what would you do on a daily basis?
On a daily basis? So primarily what I would do is drive to my territory, whether it was wherever. So, and then I would have doctors that I would call on. Sometimes I may do a breakfast with the physician. Sometimes I may do a lunch with a physician or their office. And then basically job I always try to get 8 to 10 what we would call like details in with a physician, where we would discuss the benefits of the product or some kind of message that we would be giving the physician. We do that. That would be my day.
And then you would do that for the prescribers in the geographic area covered by your territory?
Yes.
So is it safe to say that Mallincrodt directly promoted its branded opioids to prescribers in Tennessee?
I would imagine so, yeah.
And that was part of what your role was, is to go into these doctors' offices and directly promote Mallincrodt's branded opioids, right?
Yeah.
And to deliver those messages that you were just talking about, correct?
Yes.
How did you decide with regard to the branded opioids that you promoted on behalf of Mallincrodt? How did you decide which prescribers you would go call on?
We were given a list or a target list that we would go after and visit.
Did you ever ask where these target lists came from?
No.
Was it your understanding that it was a list of providers who were prescribing opioids?
Some of them were, some of them weren't. I guess some of them, I mean, if there was no chance that they would write an opioid medicine for any kind of anything, then I think it would be mutually agreed upon that it would have been a waste of our times to be talking to that physician.
Who would give you your list?
That I can't recall. It could have been my manager, it could have been corporate, it could have been, I don't know.
And then how did you physically receive it?
Email.
And then would there be a list that you would get every day that say, here are the 8 or 10 prescribers you need to call on today?
No.
It would be a target list for a given period of time, and you were supposed to direct your promotion activities to those people on that list for that given period of time?
Generally speaking, yes.
And is it safe to say that for the vast majority of the prescribers that you called upon, either in person or on the phone, those were prescribers that were prescribing opioids to patients?
Objection to form.
Sure. Or they treated some kind of pain relief in some fashion.
Sure, and that's what opioids treat, is it is meant to treat pain, correct?
Pain management, yes.
Well, what was the FDA-approved use of Exalco?
I don't know. I don't know exactly what it was. I can't recall.
Do you know what the FDA-approved use of Zardamus was?
Can't recall.
Do you recall the FDA-approved use of Penzed?
Can't recall. It's been many years. I've forgotten about it. It's not part of my brain anymore.
Did Mallincrodt target high-volume opioid prescribers in Tennessee to decide which prescribers you were supposed to promote to?
Objection to form.
I'm sure that would probably be a factor that would play into it.
In your time as a specialty sales representative, did you use IMS Health data?
The abbreviation sounds familiar. I don't know what IMS stands for.
Neither do I. But you would use that in part in your promotion activity for branded opioids?
Objection.
I don't know if I would use it for... I can't recall exactly what the IMS was for, so I can't say yes or no.
Well, they could provide information on physicians prescribing opioids. Does that ring a bell?
Vaguely.
And you or Covidian and Mallincrodt would follow the prescriptions written by the prescribers you were targeting, right?
Objection to form.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, Mallincrodt, or maybe you, would monitor those prescribers that you promoted to as to whether or not they were writing scripts for Exalco, right?
Same objection.
We would get weekly, maybe, I think it was weekly, information on sales for a specific medicine or specific medicines.
So you would get weekly emails?
I think so. I think they'd be emails, yeah.
So you would get weekly emails as to the prescribers on your target lists, the prescription sales for those prescribers.
Sure.
And that would include a list of how many opioid prescriptions they wrote, correct?
I would assume so.
Objection to
If
form.
they were, if it was that type of physician that would be writing opioids, but if it was a Penzed target, they wouldn't have that information necessarily.
But for the prescribers that you were promoting branded opioids for, you would get reports on their opioid prescriptions.
Yes.
And those would come by email on a weekly basis.
I believe a weekly basis. I can't tell you for sure.
And then you would line up to see if your promotion activities followed with more scripts for branded opioids, right?
Objection to form.
I mean, that's part of, yeah, sure.
That's part of your job as a specialty sales representative, right?
Same objection.
Sure. But our other main job is to help promote the medicines, help educate the physicians. So that's also what we're doing.
Sure. Can you strike that? Describe to me every way in which you would have interacted with a prescriber in your promotion activities.
Objection to form.
You mean like face-to-face meeting?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I would either, I think I already mentioned, so I would either, we sometimes, I mean, and it would depend on the offices, what their kind of rules of the, you know, rules that they had within their own practice, but it would be either like in the office via a breakfast or a lunch. That would be on the, you know, daily, regular basis. Then periodically we would do dinner programs. That would be the scope of it.
So you would do in-person visits to prescribers, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I need a yes or
Yes. Yes.
no. You would do phone calls.
No. Only time I would call, I would never call a doctor specifically. I would call an office to confirm, we got lunch tomorrow. How many people are going to be in attendance? 15 people. Great. Where would you like lunch from? Oh, we love such and such place. Okay. I'll be there about 12 o'clock. That would be the extent of any phone call that I would have.
So if I'm understanding your testimony correctly, you would do in-person visits to prescribers at their offices, correct?
Correct.
You would do lunches, correct?
At their offices.
So you would bring lunch to the office, you wouldn't go somewhere for lunch?
Correct.
Would you do dinners?
No. We would do dinner programs if we had a speaker come in, but I would not take an office out to dinner. No.
Okay, and then, so we have the in-person office visits, and we have the speaker events.
Correct.
Would you do webinars with prescribers?
Now that you say that, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure we. And I can't remember if it was with Mallincrodt or not, but yes, that would be part of what we would do.
What's a speaker event?
Speaker events is when we would have a speaker come into an area, let's just say Johnson City, and we would invite the physicians who may be interested in learning more about the product or disease state or would be interested in hearing that speaker talk, and they would attend the program.
And dinner would be served at those events?
Yes.
Would they typically be at a hotel?
Yeah, sure. Hotel, restaurant. Anywhere where there's a blocked off area where there could be not a lot of noise outside of right there so that they could focus on the presentation.
And typically there would be a doctor who is the speaker at these events?
There would always be a doctor. They're not, I wouldn't be doing the presentation.
That's what I'm getting at, is there's a doctor there who is the speaker.
The expert, yes.
And Covidian and Mallincrodt would pay for that event, right?
Yes.
Including the food.
Yes.
At a typical speaker event, was there a number of prescribers that you were trying to get to attend?
I would try and get as many as possible, but honestly, they weren't very well attended. And I can't remember one program with Mallincrodt/Covidian that one, if I had one in Tennessee or North, I can't remember, and I don't ever remember one being highly attended. Doctors, you know what, they got their personal lives too, and they work all day, and spouses weren't allowed to go to these programs, nor family, because of the rules of the industry, because it was purely for educational purposes. And you know what, they finished their day at 4 or 5, whatever, and they want to go home. So to try over the years, as the rules got more and more regulated with these dinner programs, it became more and more common that physicians would not attend.
During your in-person visits, would you leave material for the prescriber?
I can't recall.
Would you leave like magnets?
I can't recall.
Would you leave promotional brochures for your products?
I can't recall. Again, from when I first started in the industry and when I left the industry, there was a lot of changes that would occur. Stuff that we could leave behind, what we couldn't leave behind,
Well, I want to.
etc. So for me to specifically remember again, I haven't been doing this for many years. So for me to remember specific what I left, didn't leave, have no idea.
And again, I want to focus on your time at Covidian in Mallincrodt. But as part of your in-person visit, are you saying that you never left material there?
I'm saying I can't recall. I'm not saying whether I did or did not. I just can't remember if I did or not.
During a typical in-person visit, how long would your interaction with the prescriber last?
It would totally depend on how busy the physician was. It was all catered to the physician, and if they were, how they were set up, it could be anywhere from, I don't have time for you today, so that would be 3 seconds, to an hour during a lunch. So I would say a safe parameter would be between 3 seconds and 60 minutes.
Would you try to spend as much time with the prescriber as the prescriber would allow?
No objection to form.
Not necessarily.
Well, when you're planning out your day, and you say that your typical day was trying to call on 8 to 10 physicians, right?
Yes.
You wouldn't try to schedule your day with some understanding about how long you were going to be in with the prescriber?
Objection.
Yes, but that's not what you asked me. You asked me, would I try and spend as much time as possible with that physician? And the answer to that is no.
Okay, and I understand that. But what I'm trying to get at is, what was your typical plan as to how much time you would try to spend with a prescriber?
Objection.
If I have a specific plan, it would depend. Every time I went into an office, you had no idea what was going to be going on. So for me I wasn't the one directing or demanding the time allotted for a physician. It was totally dependent on the physician. They could be in the middle, I could be walking in there, somebody could be having a heart attack, somebody, whatever. And boom, there goes my day. I was going to do a lunch, can't do a lunch. They're sick, they're whatever. And so I didn't really go into any office with any true expectation of exactly here's what I'm going to do. This is what I would like to have happen, but the best people in this industry realize that things are going to happen just like life, and so it can change in an instant.
Well, what was it that you would have liked to have happen at your office visit?
Get some FaceTime with the physician, be able to talk to them about the benefits of the product, or give them some new information about the disease state, something that would pique his or her interest, something that where we could have some dialogue. I would imagine just like any sales job, period.
Would you also talk about how your or Covidien Mallinckrodt's products were positioned with regard to other products?
Objection form.
I don't understand what you mean by positioned with
Sure,
other
and
products.
that was a poorly worded question, but would you talk to and I want to stay in the branded opioid world. So when, say you're going to a prescriber's office to talk about Exalgo, did you have occasion to also talk about other opioids that the prescriber could be prescribing, like Opana ER?
Objection form.
Would we talk about that? No.
You wouldn't try to give the prescriber an understanding about why Exalgo might be better for a patient than Opana ER, for example?
Objection form.
Not that I believe, not that I recall.
You would agree with me that it's important to provide truthful and accurate information to prescribers about the drugs you are promoting, right?
Of course.
And Covidien and Mallincrodt provided you the training that you would use to deliver those messages to those prescribers?
Yes.
Would you take with you a binder of information at a standard in-person office visit?
Usually a sales aid that would be given to us from the company.
And did you have specific sales aids for each product?
Yes.
So you'd have a sales aid for Exalgo,
Yep.
you'd have a sales aid for Pennsaid,
Yes.
and you'd have a sales aid for Zardamus.
Yep. But I thought we were sticking strictly with opioids. Because if
Yeah.
they are, then Pennsaid wouldn't fall under that umbrella.
I understand that. Where did you, and Covidien and Mallincrodt provided you that information?
Yes.
Did you ever question the accuracy or the truthfulness of that material?
No.
Did a physician or prescriber ever raise concerns to you about the truthfulness or accuracy of that material?
Not that I recall.
Did a prescriber ever raise concerns to you about the truthfulness of the material that you presented them?
Is that different than what you just asked me a second
Well,
ago?
I'm just trying to get away from the objection to form, which I assume is because it was a compounded question. So I'll take them one at a time.
Can you repeat the question?
Did a prescriber ever raise concerns to you about the truthfulness about the material that you presented to them?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did a prescriber ever raise concerns to you about the accuracy of the material you presented them?
Not that I can recall.
It was not your practice to do follow-up phone calls with prescribers after an in-person visit?
Objection form.
Nope.
Counsel, we've been going about an hour, so there'd be a good time to take a break.
Yeah, and before we go off the record, just so you know, anytime you need a break today, speak up.
Okay.
My only rule is that if I have a question on the table, please answer it. We'll take a break.
Okay.
So, and that goes for anybody in the room. So happy to take a break.
And can I just say while we're still on the record that for the objections I've been making only objections as to form. I assume that all other objections except for privilege are reserved.
I assume that that's a standing issue in all of these depositions, and I'm happy to agree to it today.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
This is the end of Media One. The time is 10:23 p.m. We're off the record.